Jesus goes away again, the moon now shining on his face so brightly in her silvery light that it makes his red garment seem paler and paler, as if she were spreading it with a veil of white, shiny dust. Shows me his depressed, sorrowful, aged face. His eyes are still dilated, but they seem clouded. His mouth is twisted with tiredness. He goes back to his rock more slowly, and stooping more. He kneels, resting his arms on the rock, which is not smooth, but at half its height it has a kind of protrusion, as if it had been placed there deliberately, and a little plant has grown on it. I think it is a little plant of those flowers, like lilies, that I have seen also in Italy, with small pulpy leaves, round but with indented edges, and tiny little flowers on very thin stems. They look like small snowflakes spraying the grey rock, and the little dark green leaves. Jesus lays his hands near them, and the little flowers tickle his cheek, because he rests his head on his joined hands and prays. Shortly afterwards he feels the coolness of the little corollas, and raises his head. He looks at them, he caresses them, he speaks to them. You are here as well. You comfort me. These little flowers were also in my mother's little grotto, and she loved them because she used to say, when I was a little girl, my father used to say, you are a little lily like these, and you are completely full of heavenly dew. My mother. Oh, my mother. He bursts into tears, his head on his joined hands, a little reclined on his heels. I see and hear him weep, while his hands squeeze his fingers, tormenting them. I hear him say, also at Bethlehem, and have brought them to you, mother, but these ones, who will bring them to you now? He then resumes praying and meditating. His meditation must be really sad, full of anguish rather than sadness, because, to divert his attention, he stands up, he goes backwards and forwards, whispering words that I do not grasp, raising his face, then lowering it, gesticulating, rubbing his eyes and his cheeks with mechanical, agitated movements of his hands, running his fingers through his hair, as is typical of one who is in great anguish. To mention it is nothing. To describe it is impossible. To see it is to share his anguish. He makes gestures towards Jerusalem. Then he begins to raise his arms again towards the sky as if he wanted to invoke help. He takes off his mantle as if he were warm. He looks at it. But what does he see? He sees nothing but his torture, and everything serves to increase that torture. Even the mantle woven by his mother. He kisses it and says, "Forgive me, mother, forgive me." He seems to be asking it of the cloth spun and woven by motherly love. He puts it on again. He is a prey to torment. He wants to pray to get out of his state, but recollections, concern, doubts, regrets come back to him with his prayer. It is an avalanche of names, towns, people, events. I cannot follow him because he is fast and desultory. It is his evangelic life that passes in front of him and brings Judas, the traitor, back to him. His anguish is such that in order to overcome it, he shouts the names of Peter and John, and he says, they will come now. They are really loyal. But they do not come. He calls them again. He seems to be terrorized, as if he saw I wonder what. He runs fast towards the place where Peter and the two brothers are, and he finds them comfortably fast asleep round a few embers which are dying out and show only some red zigzags among the grey ashes. Peter, I have called you 3 times. What are you doing? Are you still sleeping? Do you not realize how much I am suffering? Pray, that the flesh may not win, that it may not overwhelm you. None of you. If the spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. Help me. The 3 wake up more slowly, but at last they are successful, and with dull eyes they apologize. They get up, sitting up at first, and then standing. Just fancy, murmurs Peter. It had never happened to us. It must have been that wine. It was strong, and also this cold air. We covered ourselves not to feel it. In fact, they had covered also their heads with their mantles. We did not see the fire any more. We were no longer cold, and so we fell asleep. Did you say that you called us? And yet I did not even seem to be so fast asleep. Come on, John. Let us get some twigs. Let us get a move on. We shall soon be wide awake. Do not worry, master, because now we will stand up. And he throws a handful of dry leaves on the embers, and he blows until the flame revives, and he tends the fire with the shrubs brought by John, while James brings a big branch of juniper, or of similar plant that he cut off a bush not far away, and he adds it to the rest. The fire blazes gaily, lighting up the poor face of Jesus, a face that is really so sad that one cannot look at it without weeping. All the brightness of that face is cancelled by a deadly tiredness. He says, I feel an anguish that is killing me. Oh, yes, my soul is sad even unto death, my friends. My friends. But even if he did not say so, his aspect would make one understand that he is really like a man about to breathe his last, and in the most distressing and desolate abandonment. Every word sounds like a sob. But the three are too heavy with sleep. They almost seem to be drunk, so much they stagger about with their eyes half closed. Jesus looks at them. He does not humiliate them by reproaching them. He shakes his head, sighs, and goes away to the place where he was previously. He prays once again, standing with his arms outstretched, crosswise, then on his knees as before, his face bent on the little flowers. He is pensive, silent. Then he begins to moan and sob loudly, almost prostrated. So much has he relaxed on his heels, he calls on his Father more and more anxiously. Oh, he says, this cup is too bitter. I cannot. It is above my power. I have been able to bear everything, but not this. Father, take it away from your Son. Have mercy on me. What have I done to deserve it? He then collects himself and says, But Father, do not listen to my voice if what I ask is against your will. Do not remember that I am your son, but only your servant. Let your will be done, not mine. He remains thus for some time. Then he utters a stifled cry and raises his face, looking very upset. Only for a moment. Then he drops on the ground with his face really on the earth, and remains thus, a worn-out man, overburdened by all the sins of the world, struck by all the justice of the Father, oppressed by the darkness, the ashes, the bitterness, by that tremendous, terrible, most dreadful thing that is the abandonment by God, while Satan torments us. It is the asphyxia of the soul. It is to be buried alive in this prison that is the world, when we can no longer feel any tie between us and God. It is to be chained, gagged, stoned by our very prayers, which fall back on us bristling with sharp points and spread with fire. It is to butt against a closed heaven, which neither the voice nor the appearance of our anguish can penetrate. It is to be orphans of God. It is madness, agony, the doubt of having been deceived so far. It is the persuasion of being rejected by God, of being damned. It is hell. Oh, I know, and I really cannot bear the sight of the cruel suffering of my Christ, knowing that it is 1,000,000 times more dreadful than the pain that consumed me last year, and that still upsets me when I think of it. Jesus moans, having the death rattle in his throat, and sobbing like one in agony. Nothing, away! The will of my Father, his will, only his will. Your will, Father, yours, not mine. In vain, I have but one Lord, the most holy God, one law, obedience, one love, redemption. No, I no longer have a mother. I have no life any more. I have no divinity any longer. I no longer have a mission. In vain you tempt me, devil, through my mother, my life, my divinity, and my mission. Mankind is my mother and my life. I love it to the extent of dying for it. I am giving my life back to him who gave it me, and who is now asking me for it, the supreme master of all living things. I assert my divinity, as it is capable of this expiation. I am fulfilling my mission through my death. I have nothing else, except to do the will of the Lord my God. Be off, Satan. I said so the first and the second time. I repeat it for the third time. Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass by me, but let your will be done, not mine. Be off, Satan. I belong to God. Then he speaks no more except to say, panting, God, God, God. He calls him at each heartbeat, and at each beat blood seems to flow out of him. The cloth on his shoulders gets soaked in it, and becomes dark, notwithstanding that the clear moonlight illuminates it completely. A brighter light appears above his head, hanging about 1 meter above him. It is so bright that even the prostrate master can see it filter through his wavy hair, already weighed down by blood. And notwithstanding the veil of blood covering his eyes, he raises his head. The moon shines on his poor face, and more brightly shines the angelic light, which is like the white-blue diamond of the star Venus, and all the dreadful agony appears in the blood transuding from his pores. His eyelashes, hair, mustaches, beard are sprinkled and covered with blood. Blood trickles from his temples. Blood spouts from the veins of his neck. His hands drip blood, and when he stretches his hands towards the angelic light, and his wide sleeves sleeves slide back towards his elbows. Christ's forearms can be seen sweating blood. Only his tears draw two neat lines in the red mask of his face. He takes off his mantle again and wipes his hands, face, neck, and forearms, but his sweat continues. He presses the cloth against his face several times, holding it pressed with his hands, and every time he changes its position, clear impressions appear on the dark red cloth, and as they are damp, they seem to be black. The grass on the ground is red with blood. Jesus seems on the point of fainting. He unties the neck of his tunic as if he felt that he was suffocating. He takes his hand to his heart and then to his head, and he weighs it in front of his face, as if he wanted to fan himself, with his mouth half open. He drags himself towards the rock, but closer to the edge of the escarpment, and he leans with his back against it, his arms hanging along his body, as if he were already dead, his head bent on his chest. He moves no more. The angelic light slowly fades away. Later, it seems to vanish in the clear moonlight. Jesus reopens his eyes. He raises his head with difficulty. He looks around. He is alone, but he is less anguished. He stretches out one hand. He draws to himself the mantle that he had left on the grass, and wipes his face, hands, neck, beard, and hair again. He takes a large leaf which had grown on the edge of the escarpment, and is all wet with dew, and he continues to clean himself with it, wetting his face and hands, and then drying himself again. He does the same several times with other leaves, until he wipes out the traces of his dreadful sweat. Only his tunic is stained, particularly on the shoulders, and at the folds of the elbows, at the neck, waist, and knees. He looks at it, shakes his head. He also looks at his mantle, but he sees that it is too stained. He folds it and lays it on the rock, where it forms a cradle near the little flowers. With difficulty, owing to weakness, he turns round and kneels down. He prays, resting his head on his mantle, on which he had already laid his hands. Then, leaning on the rock, he stands up, and still staggering a little, he goes to the disciples. His face is very pale, but it is no longer upset. It is a face full of divine beauty, although it is deadly pale and much sadder than usually. The three are sleeping soundly, all enveloped in their mantles, lying down near the fire, which is out. They can be heard to breathe deeply as they begin to snore loudly. Jesus calls them in vain. He has to bend and shake Peter vigorously. "What is it? Who is arresting me?" the apostle asks as he emerges from his dark green mantle, looking bewildered and frightened. "Nobody. It is I calling you." "Is it morning?" "No. It is almost the end of the second watch." Peter is completely benumbed. Jesus shakes John, who utters a cry of terror when he sees the face of a ghost. It is as white as marble, bending over him. "Oh, you look like dead to me." He shakes James, who, thinking that his brother is calling him, says, "Have they arrested the master?" "Not yet, James," replies Jesus, "but get up now and let us go. He who is going to betray me is close at hand." The three, still drowsy, get up. They look around. Olive trees, the moon, nightingales, a light breeze, peace, nothing else. But they follow Jesus without speaking. Also, the other 8 are more or less asleep around a fire that has gone out. "Get up," orders Jesus in a thunderous voice. "As Satan is arriving, show him who never sleeps, and his children, that the children of God are not asleep." "Yes, Master." "Where is he, Master?" "Jesus, but what happened?" And amid muddled questions and answers, they put on their mantles again, just in time to appear in order to the guards, headed by Judas, as they burst into the little square, lighting it up sinisterly with many torches. It is a horde of bandits disguised as soldiers, who look like jailbirds and grin like devils. There is also an odd champion of the temple. All the apostles jump to one corner, Peter in front, the others behind him in a group. Jesus remains where he was. Judas approaches Jesus, enduring the glance of his eyes, which have become the flashing eyes of his best days, and he does not lower his face either. On the contrary, he approaches the master with the smile of a hyena and kisses his right cheek. "My friend, what have you come for? Are you betraying me with a kiss?" Judas bends his head for a moment, then raises it, insensible to reproach, as to every invitation to repent. Jesus, after the first words uttered with the majesty of a master, speaks in the sorrowful tone of one who resigns oneself to a misfortune. The guards, shouting, come forward with ropes and clubs and try to get a hold not only of Christ, but also of the apostles, with the exception of Judas Iscariot, of course. "Who are you looking for?" asks Jesus calmly and solemnly. "Jesus the Nazarene. I am he." His voice is thunderous. Before the murderous world and the innocent one, before nature and the stars, Jesus bears this clear, loyal, certain witness to himself. I should say that he is happy to be able to bear it. But if he had thrown a thunderbolt, he could not have done more. They all fall to the ground like mown sheaves of corn. No one remains standing except Judas, Jesus, and the apostles, who take fresh heart again at the sight of the overthrown soldiers, so much so that they approach Jesus, threatening Judas so explicitly that the latter makes a leap just in time to avoid a masterly stroke of Simon's sword, in vain pursued by the stones and kicks and sticks thrown at him by the apostles, not armed with swords. He escapes beyond the Kidron and disappears in a dark lane. "Stand up. Who are you looking for? I ask you once again." "Jesus the Nazarene." "I have told you that I am he," says Jesus kindly. Yes, kindly. "So, let these others go. I will come. Put away swords and clubs. I am not a brigand. I have always been among you. Why did you not arrest me then? But this is Satan's hour, and yours." But while he is speaking, Peter approaches the man who is holding out the ropes to tie Jesus and gives a clumsy blow with his sword. If he had struck him with the point, he would have slaughtered him like a ram, whereas all he does is to cut off part of his ear that remains hanging down, shedding much blood. The man shouts that he is dead. There is chaos because some want to come forward, while some are afraid, seeing swords and daggers shine. "Put those weapons away. I order you to do that. If I wanted, I could have the angels of my Father to defend me. And you, be cured, in your soul first of all, if you can." And before stretching out his hands to be roped, he touches the ear and cures it. The apostles shout very unbecomingly. Yes, I am sorry having to say so, but it is the truth. Some say one thing, some another. Some shout, "You have betrayed us," and some, "He is mad," and some say, "And who can believe you?" And those who do not shout run away. And Jesus is left all alone, he and the guards, and his way begins.